This is Kenny Lee Burgess, and welcome to episode 3 of the Mojo Bag. Now let's look at some of the traditional 3-string instruments that originate from various parts of the world, examine their methods of tuning, and listen to the different sounds and styles of music these instruments create. First is the Cuban trace guitar. It consists of 3 double courses of strings tuned in the key of C, G, C, E, or 5-1-3. These 3 notes make up a C major chord. This is exactly the same interval relationship found in open C tuning on a standard guitar, from low to high, C, G, C, G, C, E, or 1-5-1-5-1-3. Next is the Japanese samisen. It is a fretless instrument played with a large handheld pick. The first and third strings are tuned an octave apart. The 3 major tunings are bass tuning, D-G-D, or 1-4-1, raised second, D-A-D, or 1-5-1, lowered third, D-G-C, or tuned in fourths. Now we come to the Russian balalaika. The most common balalaika is the prima, which is tuned E-E-A. The second and third strings are tuned to the same note. Sometimes the balalaika is tuned guitar style to G-B-D, mimicking the 3 highest strings of the Russian guitar, making it a little bit easier to play for Russian guitars, although balalaika purists frown on this tuning. Not many people know this, but there is a traditional school of classical music in Russia that utilizes a 7-string guitar tuned in open G, D, G, B, D, G, B, D, or 5-1-3-5-1-3-5. This is very similar to the open G tuning or Spanish tuning utilized on a 6-string guitar, but there's no third in the bass, D, G, D, G, B, D, or 5-1-5-1-3-5. And finally, a Persian instrument, the setar or tar, which has about 25 tied-on movable frets. 2.5 centuries ago, a 4th string was added to this instrument. It has 3 double courses of strings, each pair tuned in unison, that are tuned in fourths, C, G, C, plus 1 bass string that runs outside the fingerboard and passes over an extension of the nut. The bass string is tuned to G, an octave lower than the middle strings. Here are a few diagrams illustrating different methods for tying on frets. Gut or very thick nylon fishing line can be used. Sometimes notches were cut into the neck to stabilize the frets. More detailed instructions can be found by Googling tying on frets. I receive many questions about the acoustic guitars played by the early blues masters. So basically you're talking about guitars manufactured in the 1920s and the 1930s. Some of the major manufacturers are Oscar Schmidt, who produced this guitar, the Stella, right here in New Jersey. Galliano. Now Galliano actually would purchase bodies and necks from Oscar Schmidt and make fancier models by inlaying the fingerboards or making a nicer bridge or better binding. There was Regal, based in Chicago. And there was also Supertone, which was a Sears brand that was sold mainly through mail order catalogs. So let's look at some of the unique characteristics of these instruments. First off is this hourglass shape. Another thing is the wood. They were made out of very light wood. These guitars are very light. Sometimes they used birch. Now during the turn of the century, the Pollard guitar had a lower bout that was about 12 inches across. These guitars are slightly larger and called concert-sized guitar. The lower bout is about 13 to 14 inches. The neck. Now there is no truss rod, no metal support rod. So to make the neck stronger, they would use more wood, make it a little more clubbier, and it would shape it like a V. That's why they would call it a V neck. Next is the internal bracing in the guitar. It's called ladder bracing. There are wooden slats going across this way. Not many, maybe 3 or 4 to stabilize the guitar. So here's the double-edged sword. Light wood, no truss rod, ladder bracing. Made for a lot of volume and a big throaty tone, but not very stable, prone to kind of folding up. Today, the way they make guitars is they use stronger woods, and they use what's called X bracing. So the slats kind of go diagonally this way and that way, making X patterns. So coupled with the truss rod, the X bracing, and the heavier woods, you get much stabler guitar. That's why these guitars are kind of collectible, because people want that throaty sound that they produce. You can still find these guitars. They're not that expensive, but a lot of times they need a lot of work. Over here, let me show you this. This is a Sears Supertone model. And you can see it has the Hawaiian motifs painted on it, because during the 1920s, Hawaiian music was very popular. And also plastic was a new product in the 1920s and 30s. So what you see here is, instead of using expensive mother of pearl, they had perloid, or also known as mother of toilet seat. And they would cover fingerboards and headstocks. They would just go to town with this stuff. So I hope this answers some of your questions. Now let's continue on with our study of theory. I'm tuned 151, or in the key of G, G, D, G, and I would encourage you to take the notes that you learned in the major scale and try to figure out simple melody lines. Now sometimes you might have to look for notes outside of the scale, but you can work on songs like When the Saints Come Marching In. And then you can add the walking bass that I taught on CD4 and make a nice little arrangement. Something like that.